Welcome to the Sleepy Science Network. If you're seeking something relaxing, contemplative, and gently filled with wonder to help you drift off to sleep. Tonight, we will drift softly through the story of our species, not in haste, but like a gentle river flowing through time. Imagine the Earth millions of years ago, a world ruled by creatures so vast they could crush forests with a single step. The dinosaurs roamed the land, massive marine reptiles swam the oceans, and in the skies, pterosaurs glided silently above the forests. Small mammals existed quietly in this world, unseen and mostly nocturnal, moving in the shadows to survive. Their lives were humble, their movements careful, but they carried within them the spark of what would one day become humanity. Then, in a single moment on the scale of the Earth, an asteroid collided with the planet. Firestorms ignited, tsunamis surged, and darkness fell across the continents. The age of dinosaurs ended, and in the empty spaces left behind, mammals began to thrive. Among them were the first true primates, small, tree-dwelling creatures with grasping hands and eyes that looked forward, perceiving depth with clarity. Their senses sharpened, their limbs adapted, and in these subtle changes, evolution laid the groundwork for thought, for curiosity, for the intelligence that would one day define humans. These early primates were not yet humans, nor direct ancestors of our species. Yet, their adaptations to life in the trees, agility, coordination, and social awareness, were the first steps toward the complex behaviors we now take for granted. Some primates remained in the darkness of night, like modern tarsiers, while others began exploring daylight. With the sun came new challenges, predators, competition, and the need to navigate not just the forest, but one another. Social intelligence grew alongside physical ability. Eyes and hands were tools of survival, and soon, brains followed. As time passed, the apes appeared, larger and tailless, exploring the forest canopy with strong arms and flexible shoulders. Some began to experiment with life on the ground. Fossils from across Africa, Europe, and Asia tell us of species like Proconsul, Dryopithecus, and Civipithecus. Some were evolutionary dead ends, while others contributed to the lineage that led to us. Each fragment, a jaw, a limb, a tooth, whispers stories of adaptation, of survival, of change in a world that was always moving. In East Africa, the landscape began to shift. Forests thinned, and savannas expanded. The first hominins arose in this changing environment, creatures learning to walk upright. Bipedalism transformed their lives, hands were freed for tools, objects, and gestures. Movement became deliberate. The spine, pelvis, and feet slowly adapted to upright walking. Though awkward by modern standards, this new gait set the stage for every human trait that would follow. Lucy, the famous Australopithecus afarensis, walked with a unique blend of ape and human traits. Long arms and curved fingers allowed climbing, while her pelvis and knees showed she could stride across the ground with surprising confidence. Around her, footprints preserved in volcanic ash speak of families moving together, small communities leaving silent evidence of cooperation, care, and exploration. With bipedalism came a cascade of possibilities. The hands could shape tools, carry objects, and eventually, craft ideas. Australopithecus did not yet build fire or create complex shelters, but the seeds of intelligence, curiosity, and social awareness were already planted in their small brains. Evolution was working quietly, weaving together traits that would, over millions of years, culminate in Homo. By about 2.8 million years ago, Homo habilis emerged. Their brains were slightly larger, their teeth and hands more adapted for manipulation. And then, with stone tools, early humans began shaping their world in ways never seen before. The first flakes of rock were not just survival, they were the earliest evidence of planning, creativity, and cognition. These tools allowed access to new foods, cooperation in sharing resources, and a glimpse into abstract thought. The human mind was awakening. As time flowed onward, Homo erectus emerged around 2 million years ago, taller and more enduring than their predecessors. Their bodies were built for long journeys, for walking and running across landscapes that stretched far beyond the forests of their ancestors. They carried with them the knowledge of tools, simple at first, yet precise, hand axes and cleavers shaped carefully to cut, scrape, and shape the world. These were not merely objects, they were extensions of the mind, evidence that intelligence could reach beyond the skull and into the hands. Fire, perhaps first tamed by Homo erectus around 1.5 million years ago, transformed existence entirely. It extended days into nights, offered warmth, protection, and a central point for gathering. Around the fire, humans shared food, stories, and experiences. Cooking allowed new nutrition, softer food, and more energy for growing brains. With fire, cooperation became practical, and social bonds deepened. Knowledge was shared, and the seeds of culture took root. Across continents, Homo erectus thrived. Fossils in Africa, Asia, and Europe show their spread, a testament to endurance and adaptability. They were the first hominins to leave the cradle of Africa in significant numbers, venturing into new climates and ecosystems. Each migration demanded innovation, awareness, and planning. Life was not easy, yet each step left footprints of resilience. By roughly 800,000 years ago, new forms arose, Homo heidelbergensis in Europe and Africa. Larger, more robust, and increasingly intelligent, they hunted big game with spears, created shelters, and perhaps even painted or adorned themselves with pigments. Their brains averaged nearly 1,200 cubic centimeters, approaching the size of modern humans. This was intelligence tuned not only to survival, but to collaboration, strategy, and foresight. From Homo heidelbergensis, two major branches emerged. In Europe, Neanderthals adapted to colder climates, shorter and stockier, yet no less clever. They crafted tools, buried their dead, and displayed evidence of symbolic thought. In Africa, the lineage that would become Homo sapiens continued to evolve, their brains and behaviors growing more complex, their social networks expanding across landscapes rich with challenges. By 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens appeared, carrying a mix of modern and archaic traits. Their faces were flatter, brains large, yet their behavior was still forming. Stone tools, cooperative hunting, and plant gathering were part of daily life, but symbols, stories, and abstract thought were only faintly emerging. For tens of thousands of years, they lived alongside other hominins, sharing the continent and perhaps knowledge. Around 70,000 years ago, humans began to leave Africa, spreading across the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and eventually to far corners of the world. Along the way, they encountered Neanderthals and other hominins. Interbreeding occurred, leaving traces still present in modern genomes. Migration was not just physical movement, but cognitive expansion, a test of imagination, planning, and trust in collective memory. By 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began expressing symbolic behavior. Beads made from shells, carved pigments, and cave paintings appeared across continents. These were not merely decorations, they were communication, memory, and identity externalized. Ideas could now exist beyond the mind, shared among groups and preserved across generations. Culture became cumulative, knowledge passed not only by observation, but through teaching, imitation, and storytelling. With this cognitive revolution, humans could plan for the distant future. They built more complex shelters, made clothing, and managed fire in ways that shaped landscapes. Each community developed distinct tools, ornaments, and rituals. Burial practices suggested reverence for the dead, hinting at abstract thought and social cohesion. Humans were becoming not just survivors, but architects of their own cultural evolution. From small foraging bands, humans would eventually build villages, cities, and civilizations. Yet even in these earliest times, adaptability was the key trait. From deserts to tundras, oceans to mountains, humans learned to survive by thinking ahead, cooperating, and transmitting knowledge. Unlike other species, Homo sapiens thrived on change, shaping both their environment and themselves in the process. As the last ice age began to ease, roughly 12,000 years ago, humans faced a world in transition. Vast glaciers receded, seas rose, and ecosystems shifted. For countless generations, our ancestors had survived as foragers, moving with the seasons, following herds, gathering fruits, roots, and grains. Life was uncertain, but it was also balanced with the rhythms of the earth. Then, slowly, something extraordinary began to happen. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people experimented with wild grains like wheat and barley. What began as simple gathering transformed into deliberate planting. Seeds placed in soil grew into crops, tended and harvested in cycles that tied humans more closely to place than ever before. This was the dawn of agriculture, the Neolithic Revolution. Agriculture changed everything. With cultivated fields came permanent settlements. Instead of wandering endlessly, people built homes, villages, and eventually towns. Clay was shaped into pottery, storing surplus food. Goats, sheep, and cattle were domesticated, providing milk, meat, and hides. Fields became landscapes of labor, and rivers became lifelines of fertility. Yet with stability came complexity. Surplus food allowed populations to grow. More mouths required greater organization, and greater organization required leadership. Small communities developed hierarchies, roles, and responsibilities. Farmers, builders, hunters, and gatherers worked side by side. Slowly, villages became proto-cities, places where hundreds, and eventually thousands, lived together. In Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the first true cities rose. Uruk, Ur, and Babylon became centers of innovation. Here, clay tablets recorded grain and trade, marking the birth of writing. Cuneiform symbols pressed into wet clay allowed memory to stretch beyond the mind, beyond speech, into permanence. Laws, stories, and transactions could now endure for centuries. At the same time, the Nile River nourished Egypt. Predictable floods enriched the soil, allowing agriculture to flourish. With this stability came monumental architecture, the pyramids, temples, and tombs that still rise from the desert today. These were not merely structures of stone, they were expressions of belief, of social order, of human imagination reaching toward eternity. In the Indus Valley, cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro demonstrated remarkable planning. Streets aligned in grids, drainage systems carried water, and trade connected them to distant lands. To the east, in China, rice cultivation thrived along river valleys, shaping a civilization that would endure across millennia. In the Americas, maize, beans, and squash formed the foundation of cultures that would one day build pyramids of their own. Agriculture allowed specialization. Not everyone needed to farm. Some became artisans, crafting pottery, weaving cloth, or shaping metal. Others became traders, carrying goods along rivers and roads. Priests, rulers, and scribes emerged, each contributing to the growing fabric of human society. With specialization came inequality, but also art, knowledge, and innovation. The Bronze Age dawned, when humans learned to mix copper and tin, forging tools and weapons stronger than stone. With bronze came plows that tilled soil more effectively, and blades that carried both promise and peril. Societies armed with bronze expanded their influence, conquering neighbors and shaping territories into kingdoms. Yet even as power grew, humanity remained bound to the cycles of the earth. Droughts, floods, and failed harvests reminded all that survival still depended on nature. Religion flourished as a way to understand and appease the forces that governed existence. Sun gods, river deities, and ancestral spirits filled myths, weaving meaning into the struggles and triumphs of daily life. By around 3,000 years ago, iron replaced bronze. Stronger, more abundant, and more reliable, iron tools allowed farmers to cultivate more land, and warriors to expand empires. Civilizations grew in scale and complexity, empires rose and fell, each leaving behind ruins, artifacts, and stories. From the Assyrians to the Persians, from the Greeks to the Romans, humans demonstrated again and again the power of imagination combined with organization. But beneath it all, the core remained the same: cooperation, curiosity, and the ability to share knowledge. From cave paintings to cuneiform tablets, from oral traditions to papyrus scrolls, humans carried forward the most valuable inheritance of all, ideas. Each generation added to the work of the last, building bridges across time. As human societies grew into great civilizations, their concerns expanded beyond food and shelter. With stability came the space for reflection. People began to ask questions not only about survival, but about meaning. What is justice? What is truth? What is the universe made of? In every corner of the world, thinkers, poets, and priests sought answers to mysteries that still echo today. In ancient Greece, city-states like Athens and Sparta flourished. Athens became a center for philosophy, democracy, and art. Here, Socrates walked the streets, engaging citizens in dialogue, challenging assumptions, and urging people to examine their lives. Plato, his student, envisioned worlds of forms, eternal and unchanging, while Aristotle catalogued knowledge, from biology to ethics, laying the groundwork for science as systematic inquiry. At the same time, the Greek world embraced mathematics. Pythagoras, Euclid, and Archimedes expanded human understanding of geometry, mechanics, and number. These ideas were not only intellectual pursuits but practical tools, shaping architecture, engineering, and navigation. The Parthenon rose upon the Acropolis, ships sailed across the Mediterranean, and dramas filled open-air theaters, blending entertainment with reflection on the human condition. To the east, ancient India nurtured philosophies that explored the nature of self and existence. The Upanishads questioned the essence of reality, Buddhism taught the path of mindfulness and compassion, and Jainism emphasized nonviolence and respect for all living beings. These traditions did not seek conquest but inner transformation, offering paths toward liberation from suffering. In China, Confucius taught the importance of harmony, duty, and moral order, while Laozi spoke of the Tao, the natural flow of life that cannot be forced. These philosophies shaped not only individuals but entire societies, guiding governance, culture, and daily life for centuries. Knowledge was not separate from living, it was woven into the rhythms of family, community, and state. Meanwhile, the Roman Empire spread across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Roman engineers built roads that stretched for thousands of miles, aqueducts that carried fresh water, and arenas that hosted both games and spectacles. Law became codified, citizenship expanded, and Latin became the root of many modern languages. Rome demonstrated the power of organization, infrastructure, and centralized authority, but it also revealed the fragility of empires, for even the strongest could fall. Science in this era was often entwined with philosophy. In Alexandria, scholars gathered at the Great Library, studying medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. They charted the stars, calculated the circumference of the earth, and debated the motion of the heavens. Although many of their theories would later be revised, their spirit of inquiry left a legacy of curiosity and exploration. Religion, too, evolved in profound ways. Judaism, Christianity, and later Islam emerged from the Middle East, shaping cultures and civilizations with teachings about morality, community, and divine order. These traditions offered meaning in times of uncertainty, binding people together through shared rituals, sacred texts, and stories of origin. The classical age was not only about kings and philosophers. Farmers still tilled the soil, craftsmen shaped goods, and traders carried spices, silks, and metals across continents. The Silk Road connected China to Rome, passing through India, Persia, and countless other lands. Along these routes, not only goods but ideas traveled, mathematics, religion, philosophy, and art moved across cultures, weaving humanity into an ever closer network. And yet, fragility lingered. Civilizations collapsed through war, famine, or internal decline. The Roman Empire fractured, Greece fell under conquest, and dynasties rose and fell in China. But knowledge endured. Scrolls, carvings, and oral traditions preserved fragments of wisdom, waiting to be rediscovered. Even in times of loss, humanity carried forward sparks of brilliance. By the end of the classical era, humans had built great monuments, founded enduring philosophies, and laid the groundwork for science, law, and art. The questions they asked, about life, justice, and the cosmos, remain with us today, guiding us as much as they guided those who lived thousands of years ago. As the classical empires faded, the world entered a time often called the Middle Ages. It was not a single story, but many stories woven together across continents. In Europe, kingdoms rose from the ruins of Rome. In the Middle East, Islam spread, carrying with it a flowering of learning. In Asia, powerful dynasties ruled, while trade and culture thrived across vast distances. Though often imagined as a dark age, it was in truth a complex and dynamic period, full of continuity and change. In Europe, monasteries became sanctuaries of knowledge. Monks carefully copied ancient manuscripts by hand, preserving the words of Plato, Aristotle, and countless others. These texts, written on parchment, would endure through centuries, waiting to inspire new generations. The Church provided order and meaning, shaping daily life with rituals, festivals, and sacred teachings. Cathedrals rose from stone, their spires reaching skyward, filled with stained glass that told stories in light and color. Feudalism structured society into lords, vassals, and peasants. Fields were cultivated in strips, villages huddled under the protection of castles, and life revolved around seasons and harvests. Yet even within this system, change stirred. Towns slowly grew, markets expanded, and trade routes reconnected distant lands. Far beyond Europe, civilizations flourished with remarkable brilliance. In the Islamic world, the Abbasid Caliphate established Baghdad, where the House of Wisdom gathered scholars from across cultures. They translated Greek texts into Arabic, preserving and expanding knowledge of mathematics, medicine, and astronomy. Algebra, developed by Al-Khwarizmi, became a cornerstone of mathematics. Doctors like Avicenna wrote encyclopedias of medicine, while philosophers such as Averroes bridged Greek thought and Islamic tradition. In China, the Tang and Song dynasties oversaw periods of great innovation. Paper, printing, gunpowder, and the compass transformed human potential. Cities grew to populations of 1 million, bustling with markets, poetry, and art. Examination systems selected officials based on merit, ensuring governance by the learned. Along the Silk Road, traders carried silk, porcelain, and tea, spreading culture across Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. In Africa, powerful kingdoms thrived. In Mali, the city of Timbuktu became a center of learning, with libraries that rivaled any in the world. Gold and salt fueled trade, connecting Africa to the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern worlds. In Ethiopia, ancient Christian traditions flourished, while Great Zimbabwe rose as a testament to architectural and cultural achievement. The Americas, too, nurtured their own civilizations. The Maya charted the heavens, creating calendars of astonishing accuracy. Their pyramids and temples still stand as echoes of devotion and science. In the Andes, the Inca built vast road systems across mountains, uniting an empire without wheels or written script, relying instead on knotted strings called quipu to record information. The Middle Ages also brought challenges. Waves of plague swept across continents, none more devastating than the Black Death in the 14th century, which claimed millions of lives. Yet even in despair, resilience shone. Communities rebuilt, societies adapted, and new opportunities emerged in the aftermath of loss. By the late Middle Ages, Europe began to stir with fresh curiosity. Contact with the Islamic world during the Crusades brought back not only goods, but knowledge, new ideas in medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. Trade expanded through the Mediterranean, carried by ships from Venice and Genoa. Universities emerged in cities like Paris, Oxford, and Bologna, where scholars debated theology, law, and natural philosophy. The Gothic cathedrals, with their pointed arches and soaring vaults, embodied the spirit of reaching higher. And indeed, humanity was preparing for a new age of discovery. The preserved manuscripts of antiquity, safeguarded across centuries by monks and Muslim scholars alike, were about to fuel a rebirth of knowledge. The Renaissance was dawning. The Renaissance, meaning rebirth, began in Europe during the 14th and 15th centuries. It was not a sudden break from the Middle Ages, but a flowering of curiosity, creativity, and rediscovery. Ancient texts, preserved through centuries, were studied once again. Artists, scientists, and philosophers looked to the past for inspiration, while reaching toward new horizons of thought and discovery. In Italy, city-states like Florence, Venice, and Milan became centers of culture and learning. Wealth from trade and banking supported patrons who commissioned art, architecture, and scholarship. Painters like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo created works that still astonish with their beauty and detail. Leonardo was not only an artist, but an inventor and scientist, sketching machines, studying anatomy, and imagining possibilities far beyond his time. The Renaissance celebrated human potential. Humanism, a philosophy focused on human dignity and achievement, encouraged people to explore the world, question established authority, and seek truth through observation. Universities grew, scholars debated, and printing presses spread knowledge faster than ever before. Johannes Gutenberg's invention of movable type in the mid-15th century transformed communication. Books became more accessible, allowing ideas to flow across borders with unprecedented speed. Meanwhile, ships ventured into the unknown. The age of exploration unfolded as navigators set sail across oceans. Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic, Vasco da Gama reached India by rounding Africa, and Ferdinand Magellan's crew circumnavigated the globe. These journeys connected continents in ways both wondrous and tragic. New goods, crops, and ideas circulated, but so did conquest, disease, and enslavement. The world was becoming interconnected, for better and for worse. The scientific revolution followed, reshaping how humanity understood the universe. Nicholas Copernicus proposed that Earth revolved around the Sun, a radical idea that challenged centuries of tradition. Galileo Galilei, with his telescope, confirmed the moons of Jupiter and observed the phases of Venus, strengthening the case for a heliocentric cosmos. For his discoveries, he faced opposition, yet his vision endured. In England, Isaac Newton would later describe the laws of motion and universal gravitation, uniting the heavens and the earth under the same principles. The apple falling from a tree and the planets circling the sun were governed by the same forces, an elegant harmony of nature expressed in mathematics. Medicine, too, advanced. Andreas Vesalius mapped the human body with unprecedented accuracy, while William Harvey discovered the circulation of blood. Old superstitions gave way to systematic study, experiment, and proof. Knowledge was no longer simply preserved, it was tested, questioned, and expanded. The Renaissance spirit extended to the arts and literature. Shakespeare's plays explored human emotions and dilemmas with timeless insight. Architects designed cathedrals, palaces, and cities with balance and beauty. Music flourished, from polyphonic chants to the beginnings of symphonic traditions. In Asia, the Ming dynasty built the Forbidden City and sent Admiral Zheng He on vast naval expeditions, demonstrating China's power and reach. In the Americas, the Aztec and Inca empires rose to prominence, developing sophisticated agriculture, architecture, and governance before facing the devastation of European conquest. Across the world, civilizations rose and fell, but each left legacies of culture, knowledge, and resilience. The Renaissance and the scientific revolution were not merely eras of innovation, they were turning points. Humanity had begun to place observation and reason at the center of inquiry. The universe was no longer only a mystery to be endured, but a puzzle to be studied, mapped, and understood. By the 17th century, the foundations of modern science were firmly set. Telescopes and microscopes opened new worlds, vast skies above and tiny structures below. Printing ensured discoveries spread swiftly, while academies and societies gathered thinkers into communities of learning. The door to modernity had opened. The world was now poised for revolutions not only in science and art, but in industry, politics, and philosophy. The Enlightenment was on the horizon, promising to reshape humanity's relationship with knowledge, power, and itself. As the 17th and 18th centuries unfolded, the spirit of inquiry blossomed into what became known as the Enlightenment, an age where reason, evidence, and individual rights were placed at the center of thought. Philosophers, scientists, and writers across Europe and beyond sought to illuminate the world with knowledge, challenging superstition, tyranny, and ignorance. In France, Voltaire criticized injustice and defended freedom of expression. Rousseau pondered the nature of society and the social contract. Montesquieu examined systems of government, proposing the separation of powers that still shapes democracies today. Across the Channel in Britain, John Locke spoke of natural rights, life, liberty, and property, ideas that would inspire revolutions in America and France. Science advanced with unprecedented vigor. Observatories charted the stars with precision, chemists began unraveling the elements of matter, and physicians sought cures through careful study rather than ancient dogma. Carl Linnaeus created systems to classify the natural world, while Benjamin Franklin explored electricity with kites and keys. Knowledge was no longer confined to scholars alone, it spread into salons, coffeehouses, and printed pamphlets, accessible to wider audiences hungry for discovery. The Enlightenment was not only intellectual, it was revolutionary. The American Revolution declared independence from monarchy, inspired by Enlightenment ideals. The French Revolution soon followed, proclaiming liberty, equality, and fraternity, though not without turmoil and conflict. Across the world, the old order was being challenged by new visions of governance, freedom, and human potential. At the same time, another revolution was stirring, one that would reshape daily life even more profoundly: the Industrial Revolution. Beginning in Britain in the late 18th century, machines powered by water, coal, and eventually steam transformed production. Textile mills spun cotton at speeds unimaginable to earlier generations. Ironworks forged rails and engines that would power locomotives and ships. Cities swelled as people moved from rural fields to urban factories. Life was difficult in these early industrial towns, with crowded housing and harsh working conditions. Yet the productivity of machines brought cheaper goods, greater connectivity, and the foundations of the modern economy. Railroads stretched across landscapes, binding regions together. Steamships crossed oceans with speed and reliability, shrinking the world once more. Science and industry fed each other. James Watt improved the steam engine. Michael Faraday discovered the principles of electromagnetism. Charles Darwin, aboard the HMS Beagle, observed the diversity of life, later proposing the theory of evolution by natural selection, a revelation that forever changed humanity's understanding of itself. Medicine advanced as well. Vaccines, pioneered by Edward Jenner, began to protect against deadly diseases. Public health initiatives slowly improved conditions in growing cities. For the first time in history, many people could expect to live longer than their ancestors. But progress was not without cost. Factories polluted rivers and skies, children worked long hours in dangerous conditions, and colonial empires expanded, exploiting resources and people far from European shores. The Industrial Revolution carried both promise and peril, lifting millions out of poverty while deepening inequality and exploitation. The arts reflected these tensions. Romantic poets like Wordsworth and Shelley celebrated nature and emotion in response to industrialization's cold machinery. Painters captured both the majesty of landscapes and the stark reality of urban life. Music swelled in symphonies that echoed human struggles and triumphs. By the 19th century, the pace of change had quickened. Telegraphs transmitted messages across continents in moments. Steam locomotives shrieked across iron tracks. Factories lit by gas lamps worked through the night. Humanity had harnessed the forces of nature in ways that earlier generations would have thought magical. The Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution together reshaped the human condition. Reason, science, and machinery unlocked new powers. Humanity no longer merely adapted to the environment, it had begun to transform it on an unprecedented scale. The stage was set for global conflict, social reform, and further revolutions of thought and technology. The modern age was beginning. The 19th century unfolded as a century of contrasts, of dazzling progress and deep upheaval. Nations rose, empires expanded, revolutions erupted, and science advanced at a pace that astonished even those who lived through it. Humanity stood at the threshold of a new era, though not without conflict and uncertainty. Nationalism spread across Europe, weaving together communities with shared languages, histories, and aspirations. In Germany and Italy, fragmented states united into powerful nations, reshaping the balance of power. Across the Atlantic, the United States expanded westward, proclaiming ideals of freedom while grappling with the injustice of slavery, which culminated in the Civil War. The echoes of that struggle would shape the nation for generations. Meanwhile, empires stretched their reach across the globe. Britain, France, and other European powers colonized vast territories in Africa and Asia, bringing railways, schools, and administration, but also exploitation, resistance, and cultural disruption. The world was becoming more interconnected, but also more unequal. Science and technology surged forward. Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, published in 1859, proposed natural selection as the engine of evolution. This idea revolutionized biology, suggesting that life itself was shaped not by fixed design but by adaptation over time. Gregor Mendel, quietly working in a monastery garden, discovered the patterns of inheritance, laying the groundwork for genetics. Physics advanced through James Clerk Maxwell, who united electricity and magnetism into a single elegant theory of electromagnetism. Chemistry blossomed with Dmitri Mendeleev's periodic table, which organized the elements into a coherent system, predicting discoveries yet to come. Medicine, too, transformed with the germ theory of disease, pioneered by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, which revealed the microscopic causes of illness and opened the way for modern hygiene, vaccines, and treatments. Industry continued to accelerate. Railroads stitched together continents, carrying coal, steel, and people across landscapes. Telegraph wires carried messages instantly over thousands of miles, shrinking the globe into a network of information. Factories grew larger, powered now not only by steam but by electricity. Inventions like the light bulb, telephone, and internal combustion engine changed daily life in ways profound and irreversible. Culture reflected this age of transformation. Writers like Charles Dickens and Leo Tolstoy captured both the beauty and suffering of industrial society. Artists experimented with Impressionism, capturing fleeting light and movement in brushstrokes that challenged tradition. Music swelled in grand operas and symphonies, echoing the emotional complexity of the times. But progress was shadowed by turmoil. Workers in factories demanded better conditions, giving rise to labor movements, unions, and calls for reform. Women began to organize for suffrage, seeking recognition of their rights and roles in society. Revolutions flared across Europe in 1848, as people demanded liberty, equality, and dignity. Though many were suppressed, the ideas endured. The century closed with both optimism and tension. The world's great powers gathered at international fairs to display inventions, marveling at electric lights, automobiles, and the promise of flight. Yet alliances, rivalries, and colonial ambitions brewed beneath the surface. The 20th century was on the horizon, and with it, storms unlike any humanity had ever faced. By the dawn of the 1900s, the world was a place of marvels and contradictions, connected by telegraphs and railways, yet divided by empire and ideology. The seeds of both extraordinary progress and devastating conflict had been planted. The modern world was awakening, and history was about to accelerate into an age of both brilliance and tragedy. The 20th century began with a strange mix of confidence and unease. Technology promised wonders. Electric lights glowed in cities, automobiles rattled across cobblestone streets, and airplanes lifted humankind briefly into the skies. Yet beneath the optimism, tension simmered. Rival empires competed for resources and influence, alliances hardened, and nationalism surged. The world was more connected than ever, but it was also a tinderbox. In 1914, that tinderbox ignited. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo sparked a chain reaction of alliances and hostilities. The First World War began, drawing nations across Europe and beyond into a conflict of unprecedented scale. Trenches scarred the landscape, barbed wire stretched across muddy fields, and new weapons, machine guns, poison gas, and tanks, unleashed devastation on a scale the world had never seen. For 4 long years, millions fought and millions perished. Soldiers lived in mud-filled trenches, enduring shellfire, hunger, and fear. Civilians, too, bore the burden of war, with shortages, bombings, and grief. When the armistice finally came in 1918, Europe was left shattered, empires dissolved, and an entire generation marked by loss. The interwar years were a time of both hope and turmoil. The League of Nations was formed to prevent future conflict, but political instability grew. Economic depression spread in the 1930s, leaving millions unemployed and desperate. Out of this despair, authoritarian leaders rose, promising strength, unity, and revival. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party seized power, setting the stage for another, even greater catastrophe. World War II erupted in 1939. Once again, the world descended into conflict, but this time the scale was truly global. Armies clashed across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Airplanes darkened skies, tanks rolled across fields, and warships battled at sea. The Holocaust, one of history's darkest chapters, saw millions of Jews and other minorities systematically murdered in a campaign of unimaginable cruelty. Yet amidst the destruction, resilience endured. Resistance movements fought in occupied lands. Soldiers and civilians alike showed courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Nations formed alliances, the Allies and the Axis, locked in a struggle that would determine the future of humanity. In 1945, as the war neared its end, a new and terrible weapon was unleashed. The atomic bomb, developed in secrecy through the Manhattan Project, was dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In moments, tens of thousands of lives were extinguished, and entire landscapes reduced to ruins. The war ended soon after, but the shadow of nuclear weapons would linger, reshaping global politics for decades to come. The aftermath of World War II brought immense change. The United Nations was established in the hope of fostering peace and cooperation. Colonies across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East began to demand independence, ushering in the end of old empires and the rise of new nations. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, locked in a Cold War that was fought not only with weapons, but with ideology, propaganda, and influence. Technology surged forward in the post-war years. Computers, once massive machines filling entire rooms, began to process information at speeds unthinkable before. Jet aircraft shrank the globe, carrying passengers across oceans in hours. Television brought moving images into homes, reshaping culture and communication. The atomic age was also the dawn of the space age, as rockets that once carried bombs were adapted to reach beyond Earth. Yet fear lingered. Nuclear weapons stockpiled in vast numbers, capable of destroying the world many times over. Crises erupted: Berlin, Korea, Cuba, bringing humanity to the brink of disaster. But alongside the danger, hope endured. Diplomats sought treaties, citizens marched for peace, and leaders, sometimes reluctantly, stepped back from the edge. The 20th century had revealed humanity's greatest potential for both creation and destruction. In war, humans had devastated landscapes, cities, and millions of lives. In science, they had unlocked the secrets of the atom, the power of computation, and the dream of spaceflight. The world was forever changed, poised between fear and possibility, shadow and light. The decades after World War II were shaped by rivalry and tension, yet also by astonishing progress. The world had been divided into two spheres, the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union. This standoff, known as the Cold War, was a conflict fought not through direct battle between the superpowers, but through influence, proxy wars, and a constant race for technological and ideological dominance. At the heart of the Cold War was the nuclear arms race. Both the United States and the Soviet Union built vast stockpiles of atomic and hydrogen bombs. Each side knew that any direct conflict would mean mutual destruction, a balance of terror that kept peace through fear. Diplomats negotiated arms control treaties, yet the tension persisted for decades, casting a shadow over everyday life. But rivalry also fueled innovation. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Its faint beeps echoed across the globe, sparking both awe and alarm. If humanity could send machines into orbit, what else might be possible? The space race had begun. Only 4 years later, in 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human to journey into space, circling Earth in his tiny capsule. His triumphant smile became a symbol of Soviet achievement. The United States responded with determination, committing itself to landing a man on the moon. In 1969, that dream was realized. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, declaring a giant leap for mankind. The world watched in wonder, as humans looked back at Earth from another celestial body for the first time. The space age expanded human imagination. Satellites began to circle the planet, transmitting television signals, weather forecasts, and scientific data. Space probes traveled beyond the moon, reaching Mars, Venus, and the outer planets. Humanity had extended its reach into the cosmos, fulfilling dreams once confined to myth and legend. Meanwhile, technology was reshaping life on Earth. Computers, once used only for military and scientific calculations, became smaller and more versatile. Transistors replaced bulky vacuum tubes, making machines faster and more efficient. By the 1970s, early personal computers appeared, allowing individuals to process information in their own homes and offices. Communication advanced as well. Televisions became common in households, bringing news, entertainment, and culture into living rooms. Telephones connected distant voices instantly. The first digital networks were developed, laying the foundation for the Internet. Information, once confined to libraries and print, was beginning to flow in new and interconnected ways. Social change accompanied technological growth. The civil rights movement in the United States demanded equality and justice. Women pressed for greater rights and opportunities, reshaping workplaces and societies. Across the world, former colonies declared independence, forging new nations and identities in the wake of empire. The Cold War itself often flared in indirect ways. Conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan became battlegrounds of ideology, with superpowers supporting opposing sides. Yet through these struggles, ordinary people sought peace, stability, and the promise of a better life. By the 1980s, cracks appeared in the rigid order of the Cold War. Economic strain, political reform, and public pressure began to unravel the Soviet system. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, long a symbol of division, fell, as East and West Berliners embraced across once forbidden borders. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union dissolved, and the Cold War came to an end. The world entered a new era, no longer defined by two superpowers locked in opposition, but by globalization, technology, and rapidly changing connections. The digital revolution was accelerating, carrying humanity into a future of unprecedented possibility. The Cold War had left behind tension, tragedy, and triumph. It had produced the threat of annihilation but also the marvel of spaceflight, the spread of computing, and the global movement for human rights. From rivalry and fear, humanity had also drawn progress and unity. The stage was now set for the 21st century, a century in which information itself would become the most powerful force on Earth. As the 20th century drew to a close, humanity entered a new phase of transformation. The Cold War had ended, but a different kind of revolution was underway, quiet at first, then unstoppable. It was not fought with armies, but with information. It was the rise of the Internet. What began as small digital networks connecting universities and research institutions in the 1960s and 70s had, by the 1990s, expanded into a global web. The World Wide Web allowed documents, images, and ideas to flow freely across borders. Personal computers, once rare and expensive, became household staples. A new phrase entered daily life: going online. The Internet connected people in ways unimaginable to earlier generations. Emails replaced letters, traveling across the globe in seconds. Search engines opened libraries of knowledge with a few keystrokes. Forums and chat rooms allowed strangers from distant continents to converse as if they were neighbors. Information, once confined to shelves and experts, became accessible to anyone with a connection. Globalization accelerated alongside this digital revolution. Trade expanded across oceans and continents, linking markets, industries, and workers into an interconnected system. Goods manufactured in one corner of the world could be purchased in another within days. Air travel grew faster and cheaper, making international journeys routine. Cultures mixed through food, music, film, and shared experiences. New technologies reshaped communication and culture. In the early 2000s, social media platforms emerged, transforming how people shared their lives, ideas, and identities. A single message, image, or video could reach millions instantly. Movements for change gained power through hashtags and online communities, demonstrating the immense influence of collective voices. Science and medicine advanced rapidly. The mapping of the human genome opened vast new fields in biology and genetics. Cloning, stem cell research, and biotechnology raised questions about ethics and possibility. New treatments extended lifespans, while global health campaigns fought diseases across continents. Space exploration, too, continued. Space stations orbited Earth, probes reached the edges of the solar system, and telescopes gazed into galaxies billions of light-years away. Yet with progress came challenges. The global economy, though powerful, was fragile. Financial crises shook nations, reminding humanity that interconnection carried risks as well as rewards. Inequality grew, as technology enriched some while leaving others behind. Environmental concerns deepened, deforestation, pollution, and climate change raised alarms about the future of the planet. Terrorism and conflict persisted, even in a world bound together by trade and communication. The attacks of September 11, 2001, reshaped international politics, leading to wars and new debates over security, freedom, and responsibility. Technology, once seen as a promise of unity, was also harnessed for surveillance, propaganda, and division. Despite these trials, the momentum of innovation continued. Smartphones placed powerful computers into millions of pockets, granting instant access to the digital world. Apps redefined travel, work, and leisure. Online classrooms, video calls, and virtual communities blurred the boundaries between physical and digital life. Humanity was not just living in a connected world, it was living through the screens in its hands. By the early 21st century, the pace of change was staggering. Artificial intelligence began to learn and adapt, analyzing patterns far beyond human capacity. Renewable energy sources gained traction, offering hope against environmental decline. Private companies joined national space agencies in reaching toward Mars, the Moon, and beyond. The Internet age was not only technological, it was cultural. Memes, digital art, and online gaming became global languages. Knowledge spread freely, but so did misinformation, creating new challenges in discerning truth from falsehood. Humanity found itself more connected than ever before, yet also more vulnerable to the consequences of that connection. In this globalized, digital world, humanity had woven a new kind of civilization, one that existed both in cities and in cyberspace, one where progress and peril walked hand in hand. The questions of the future loomed large. How would people use this power? Would they choose cooperation or division? Would technology bring harmony, or deepen conflict? The 21st century had only just begun, but it was already clear, humanity had entered an age where information was the most powerful resource, and the choices of billions would shape the destiny of Earth. The story of humanity is still being written. After millennia of evolution, centuries of discovery, and decades of rapid change, we find ourselves in a unique moment, a crossroads where our choices will shape not only our own future, but the fate of our planet and perhaps even life beyond it. One of the greatest challenges is the environment. Climate change, driven by the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation, is altering weather patterns, melting glaciers, and raising sea levels. Extreme storms, heat waves, and droughts threaten millions, while ecosystems struggle to adapt. Scientists warn of tipping points, thresholds beyond which damage may become irreversible. Yet there is also hope. Renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, and more, is growing rapidly. Innovations in storage, efficiency, and clean technology offer pathways to reduce emissions. Around the world, people, communities, and nations are beginning to act, though the urgency is immense. At the same time, technology is advancing at breathtaking speed. Artificial intelligence is no longer science fiction, it is analyzing medical scans, driving vehicles, and translating languages. It holds the promise of solving problems once thought impossible, from predicting climate shifts to designing new medicines. Yet it also raises profound questions. How should machines be used? Who controls them? And how do we ensure that intelligence beyond human comprehension serves humanity rather than replaces it? Biotechnology, too, offers both wonder and worry. With tools like CRISPR, scientists can edit genes, correcting inherited diseases or altering crops to resist drought. Entire species might be saved, or redesigned. But these abilities demand wisdom, for altering life carries consequences that ripple across generations. Meanwhile, the dream of exploration continues. Humanity is once again reaching toward the stars. Missions aim to return humans to the moon, this time to stay. Plans for Mars colonies stir imagination, while telescopes scan distant planets for signs of life. Could humanity one day become a multi-planet species? Could we discover that we are not alone in the universe? These questions, once the domain of myth, are now active frontiers of science. Global society faces challenges of justice and equality as well. Billions still live in poverty, lacking access to clean water, education, and healthcare. As wealth and technology concentrate in some regions, disparities widen. Yet the same connectivity that reveals these gaps also offers tools to bridge them. Digital education, mobile banking, and international cooperation are lifting lives and creating opportunities where once there were none. Culture, too, is evolving in the digital age. Art, music, and storytelling flow across platforms, blending traditions and inspiring creativity. Voices once silenced find audiences worldwide. Yet this abundance of expression is matched by an abundance of noise, misinformation, conflict, and distraction. The challenge is not only to connect, but to listen, to understand, and to cultivate wisdom amid the flood of data. The 21st century will likely be defined by balance, between growth and sustainability, between technology and humanity, between ambition and responsibility. The tools we now wield are more powerful than any our ancestors could have imagined. They can heal the planet, or harm it further. They can unite us in shared purpose, or divide us into fractured worlds. And yet, if history has shown anything, it is that humanity is resilient. From the earliest primates who ventured into the forests, to the hominids who crafted tools, to the civilizations that rose and fell, to the scientists and dreamers who reached into the cosmos, we have adapted, endured, and dreamed. The future remains uncertain, but also full of possibility. Perhaps one day, distant descendants will look back at this era as the moment humanity truly came of age, when it faced its greatest challenges and chose not fear or division, but cooperation, creativity, and hope. For now, we live in the unfolding story. A story written not only by leaders or inventors, but by each individual choice, each act of kindness, each spark of curiosity, each step toward understanding. The sleepy scientist's tale continues, drifting softly through time, carrying us toward whatever dawn awaits.